It was supposed to be just another common flood in the city, something everyone was used to. But what happened that day, no one could have predicted. The waters rose quickly, flooding streets and houses, sweeping everything in their path. In the midst of the chaos, a body was found. It was injured, nearly lifeless, and was taken by rescuers to the hospital. The man had no visible identity, and no one knew who he was. He seemed like just another victim of the tragedy, but the truth was about to turn everything upside down. As the city struggled to recover, something unexpected happened. During the search of his belongings, a simple document was found in the man's pocket. At first, it seemed like just another piece of paper, with no real significance. But what was written on it caused the situation to take a completely different turn. What no one could have imagined was that this document could connect the injured man to a network of powerful individuals involved in shady business and a conspiracy that affected the entire city. That piece of paper revealed a name, and this name belonged to no ordinary person. It was connected to influential figures, to a corruption scheme that could destroy everything the city had built. The most shocking part, however, was that the injured man seemed to be the key to uncovering it all. What seemed like a simple rescue turned into a race against time to uncover the truth before it was too late. But who was he? And why was he so close to a discovery that could change everyone's life? And then came the biggest surprise of all. What that man knew could expose something even more sinister, something no one ever imagined was possible. The city was on high alert. The flood, which had started as a heavy rain, quickly turned into a natural disaster of catastrophic proportions. The streets were flooded, the houses submerged, and the residents fought to survive as the water flooded everything in its path. The scene was desolate. The sirens of the fire trucks echoed everywhere, while rescue teams raced against time to save whatever they could. It seemed like the entire city was being swallowed by an unstoppable force. But in the midst of all this, there was something that made us question reality. In the chaos of the flood, amid the rubble and debris, a man was found. He was submerged in the water, almost unconscious, his body covered in wounds. There was no identity on his face, only an expression of pain and despair. The rescuers pulled him out of the water with difficulty, taking him to one of the makeshift triage points in the city center. We didn't know who he was or what he was doing there, but his critical state suggested that he had gone through something far more than just being another victim of the flood. He was placed in a hospital bed, and the first attempts to stabilize him failed. The man was on the brink of death, but his struggle for survival was palpable. What really started to grab attention, however, was what we found in his pockets. Nothing extraordinary, just the basics, a few coins, a wet phone, but something more. Something no one expected. A document. At first, it seemed like just a simple sheet of paper, nothing that would spark much interest, but the first glance quickly revealed something that everyone there would soon regard as a puzzle. What was written on that piece of paper left us stunned. The name of a powerful person in the city was there, clearly linked to a series of mysterious financial transactions and shady business deals. How was this man, who seemed to be just another victim of the tragedy, connected to such influential figures? The document, without a doubt, had something more behind it. What did it mean? How could a simple piece of paper hold so much power? And why was it with this man? Who was he really? The city now had a new mystery to unravel. Something so big that no one was prepared for the consequences. What seemed like a mere coincidence of an injured man in the middle of the flood was, in fact, about to trigger a series of events that would forever change the city's course. And at that moment, the questions started piling up. Who was behind this? And what more was behind that document, hidden in the pocket of a man who was almost lifeless? With the document in hand, the investigation began to intensify. Initially, it seemed like just a simple coincidence, an ordinary victim among so many others. But as the details of the document began to be analyzed, the story took an unexpected turn. The name on it wasn't that of an ordinary person. It belonged to one of the most powerful men in the city, someone with a history of involvement in large construction contracts and public investments. But what drew our attention even more was a coded number that accompanied the name. The number didn't make sense immediately, but we knew it wasn't there by accident. The first reaction was disbelief. How was this injured man, seemingly a victim of the flood, connected to such an influential person? What did he have to do with such a large corruption scheme, with such powerful interests? The document indicated that there was something much darker behind the tragedy. It wasn't just a natural flood. There was something orchestrated, something planned that we still couldn't fully understand. While the man remained in a coma, investigators began to dig deeper. The number on the document led to a series of suspicious financial transactions, which seemed to be connected to a network of corruption involving local politicians, businessmen, and high-ranking authorities. As the mystery deepened, the tension grew. How could such a devastating tragedy be linked to something so sinister? And who else knew about it? The city, already weakened by the flood, now found itself embroiled in a conspiracy that threatened to destroy what little was left. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. As the investigation advanced, an anonymous source contacted the authorities, informing them of a secret meeting between the key figures in the scandal. The meeting, apparently, was scheduled to take place at an undisclosed location. And according to the source, the injured man, who was on the brink of death, was the missing piece to unravel the entire scheme. Now, the game had changed. What seemed like a simple rescue amid the flood was turning into a race against time. If that man woke up and revealed what he knew, the entire city could be shaken in a way no one could foresee. What else did he know about the corruption network? How was he involved in this scheme? And, more importantly, why had he been left to die there, in the middle of the chaos, with a simple document that held so many answers? As the man began to regain consciousness, the tension intensified. He was weak, delirious, but his eyes, when they opened, carried an indescribable anguish. One thing was clear: he knew too much. But at the same time, he seemed to fear for his life. He couldn't speak openly about what he knew, not without putting his own life at risk. With the document in hand, the investigators began to piece together a timeline. The name on the paper, along with the coded numbers, connected the dots in an alarming way. Everything pointed to a corruption scheme involving large construction contracts, diverting funds meant for public areas devastated by the flood. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. With each new discovery, more questions arose. What else was being hidden? How was this injured man so deeply involved in something so large and dangerous? Who else was at the center of this corruption network? The investigation progressed, but the city began to question whether it could trust the people leading the rescue and recovery efforts. How did we know these powerful figures, connected to the scheme, weren't manipulating the facts to protect their own interests? And that's when the first obstacles began to appear. Local authorities started to move more slowly. The investigations began to be delayed. A rumor spread through the city that pressure was being put to cover up the case. The document found in the man's pocket was mysteriously disappearing from some reports. Evidence was starting to be destroyed, or at least they were trying to. Who was trying to erase the traces? The city was submerged in a nightmare of corruption, and now, who was really in charge of the investigation? With every step we took toward the truth, more obstacles arose. It wasn't just external forces against us. There were forces within the city willing to destroy any evidence that could expose the corruption. Time was against us. With each passing day, the sense that the truth was being suppressed grew stronger. But the man, though weak, began to speak in fragments. He said disconnected words, but a pattern was beginning to form. He knew his life was in danger, but he also knew that if he didn't speak, the entire city would continue to be manipulated. Finally, the man woke up. The sound of the heart monitor and the soft hum of life support machines were the first things he heard as he regained consciousness. His eyes were blurry, and his face, pale, showed just how much he had suffered, but lucidity began to take shape. I was there, sitting by his bed, hoping he would be able to tell us something that could answer all our questions. He looked at me, as if trying to understand what was happening around him. But when his eyes finally met mine, something changed. I knew he knew. He was aware of the gravity of the situation and the need to keep secret what had really happened. But something inside him, perhaps fear or a drive for the truth, made him begin to speak. I knew this would happen, he said, his voice rough and trembling, as if each word was a tremendous effort. The document, in my pocket, it connects everything. I wasn't supposed to be here. No one was supposed to know. His breathing became heavier, and he tried to sit up in bed, making a visible effort, but I stopped him. The last thing I wanted was for him to faint again. He needed to talk, needed to tell us everything he knew. The name, that name on the document, it's the central point, he continued, struggling to stay calm. But it wasn't just that. The number on the paper, the key to everything, was more important than anyone realized. It was a password, a key to unlock documents that proved everything. I was the one who had to deliver them. And the flood. It was planned, calculated, to cover the tracks. He paused, breathing heavily, and his eyes started to tear up. I was used. I was a pawn. But now it's too late. The shock was immediate. I was in complete disbelief. How could someone so deeply involved simply be a piece in such a cruel game? The man, who seemed to be just another victim of the flood, was actually at the center of a massive scheme, something much darker than anyone could have imagined. He wasn't just the bearer of a document with a famous name, but someone who, unknowingly, carried the key to an unimaginable corruption scandal. He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret and fear. They knew. They found me, and now, the only thing that matters is destroying the evidence. It doesn't matter who dies. It doesn't matter what happens. They'll silence me. That was the big revelation. The man wasn't just in possession of information. He was a pawn in a high-stakes game. He had been forced to carry that document and, more importantly, he was carrying the evidence of a much bigger crime. The flood hadn't been a natural accident. It wasn't a simple tragedy. It had been a calculated strategy to hide something even darker. With the revelation, the investigation took a turn no one could have predicted. The man was aware that his life was at risk. He couldn't trust anyone, didn't know who was behind this, but his fears became even more evident when, during one of our conversations, he looked at me with a look of terror and said, "If anyone comes to me, don't believe them. They're everywhere." His words echoed in my mind. What more was behind this story? And, most importantly, who was so determined to hide the truth that they were willing to sacrifice lives? We needed to act fast. The document, the key to the corruption scheme, was our only clue, and as the man tried to recover, his condition worsened. Authorities began to grow more cautious, and the city, in panic over the flood disaster, started to enter a waiting mode. But the pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. The name found on the document, along with the coded numbers, seemed to indicate that something much larger was underway. The connection between high-level businessmen, politicians, and even the mysterious figure leading this operation became clearer. Each new piece of information revealed made the puzzle even more complex. Meanwhile, external forces were at work. New threats emerged. The investigations were being sabotaged. Reports vanished, evidence was destroyed, and members of the investigation were being followed. The pressure was mounting, and the fear that something terrible was about to happen grew stronger. The injured man, now aware of the importance of what he knew, started to become a key piece in the game. But he couldn't speak. He was being watched. And with each passing minute, more lives were at risk. We were on the edge. And even with all the clues, we knew we were about to enter dangerous territory. With every step we took, the shadows deepened. The truth was almost within our reach, but the cost could be higher than anyone imagined. The situation was becoming increasingly desperate. The man, now more conscious and starting to recover physically, had already revealed what he knew. But something still didn't add up. I felt there was more behind that story, that there was something bigger he wasn't saying. And then, when we least expected it, the truth came to light in a way no one could have predicted. During a tense night, while we tried to protect the man and prevent him from being silenced, he had a moment of clarity. For the first time, while fully awake, he looked directly at me. His eyes were intense, and something in them conveyed an urgency that made me realize he was about to tell everything. He called me to his bed, and with a weak but determined voice, he said, "They didn't just want to destroy the evidence. They wanted to kill me because I was the key to an even bigger secret. The document. It wasn't just about corruption. It was tied to something much more sinister, something they had already started a long time ago." He paused, breathing heavily, before continuing. "The document you found? It's not just proof of financial crimes. It's the last piece to uncover a murder. And it wasn't just any murder, but one that involved the destruction of entire families. It was there to protect the real culprits." It was at that moment that the truth began to form in my mind. What had initially seemed like a case of corruption and illegal business was actually linked to a murder committed years earlier by someone very influential, and that had been covered up to protect the powerful figures behind it. The injured man wasn't just a messenger. He was a victim, but also the key to unraveling the murder. He had been assigned to hide the truth, but the pressure to keep the secret had broken him. As he spoke, I felt a mixture of disbelief and fear. How could a murder be linked to this tragedy, and what else was being hidden? The flood, the natural disaster, was just a distraction, a smokescreen. And I knew that, if we didn't unravel the full mystery, more lives would be destroyed. The man, his eyes already tired, looked at me one last time and said, "If you want to know the truth, you can't trust anyone else. They are everywhere, and they are watching us." The tension had reached its peak. The entire city was now tied to an even bigger mystery, one that involved murders, corruption, and people who would do anything to keep the secrets buried. But, most shockingly of all, the figures involved were those the city considered the most trustworthy. With each passing minute, the truth seemed further away. The line between good and evil was fading. What no one expected was the true connection of the injured man to the figures of power. The final revelation was not about the name that appeared on the document, but rather about a much deeper secret. The man, who had seemed like a mere victim of a natural disaster, was actually an undercover agent, someone who had spent years gathering information about a corruption plan that involved not only a murder, but also a large-scale manipulation to eliminate anyone who stood in its way. As events unfolded quickly, the city was overtaken by a sense of dread. The man revealed that the flood had been manipulated to destroy documents and evidence, but also to divert attention from the real crime being committed. The people involved in the scheme were more powerful than anyone had imagined. They were in control of the city in a way that could never have been predicted. He then handed us the final piece of the puzzle, a secret file containing proof that public figures and renowned companies were behind the murder and global-scale corruption. But the most surprising thing of all was the person behind it, one of the city's greatest political allies, someone the population had complete trust in. What he had done over the years wasn't just about profit, but a series of murders and manipulations designed to hide even more terrible crimes. "They'll do everything to silence me," he said, his voice almost inaudible. "But it doesn't matter. The truth is out there now." The real objective was to make sure no one knew the truth, that no one would connect the dots. The city was not just a victim of a natural disaster. It was being manipulated by powerful people who had something to lose if the evidence was revealed. But now, the story was about to change forever. After the great revelation, the city was no longer the same. The streets, once flooded with water from the deluge, were now submerged in a sea of information, scandals, and a feeling of betrayal. Those who believed they were safe, those who thought the truth was buried under the waters, now faced an uncertain future. The injured man, who had been just a pawn in a power game, was now the catalyst for a change no one expected. The investigation quickly expanded. The secret file, now in our hands, revealed a network of corruption and manipulation involving the city's most prominent figures, people everyone respected, people who were seen as trustworthy. But trust had been broken. What had seemed like a simple natural accident was now a vast web of lies, murders, and manipulation. As the authorities began to act, many were perplexed by the true extent of what had happened. The injured man, now recovered, became a symbol of the fight for truth, but also a reminder that, even in the most desperate situations, the courage to face the truth is what truly changes the course of history. He became the catalyst for change, and his story spread throughout the city, bringing not only justice but also a new sense of responsibility and vigilance. But the most important lesson for everyone was that, no matter how hard they try to hide it, the truth always finds a way to emerge. The city that had been submerged by the flood was now being renewed, but in a way no one could have predicted. Trust, which had once been deeply rooted, was now a new pursuit of justice and truth. It was no longer just about rebuilding the city physically, but about rebuilding trust in people, institutions, and, above all, in ourselves. In the end, the reflection was clear, because, in the end, saving a life is saving an entire world. This story, more than anything else, showed the importance of every life, every act of courage, and how a single truth can change everything. The injured man was not just a victim of a natural disaster. He was the key to opening a new era of justice and change in the city. And, in the end, he proved that, no matter how much the world tries to hide under layers of lies and corruption, there will always be someone willing to expose the truth, even if it costs them everything they have.